Okay, we are doing it. We are travelling from the dusty backlots to the bright lights of Vegas. We are going to watch, we are going to discuss, we are going to take apart every single Elvis Presley movie from Love Me Tender to Change of Habit. And then at the end of the series, as a special bonus, we'll be looking at the 68 comeback special, which was the time that Elvis really escaped the shackles of Hollywood. So, pour yourself a dram, light yourself a pipe, and let's settle back. Welcome to the Tainted Tavern.
Coming to the Tainted Tavern, come sit a while for free. We talk about our musings and devices we've been using.
Okay, now today's movie is Love Me Tender from 1956, and I've made some notes here. Love Me Tender was directed by Robert D. Webb, who was a director who worked for 20th Century Fox, and he was seen as a stable hand. He was used to doing westerns, action adventure films and that sort of thing. But when he signed on to direct a film called The Reno Brothers, he didn't realise that pretty soon his film, which was going to be a bittersweet western set post-Civil War, examining some stolen gold, some stolen Union gold, and also a love triangle between two of the Reno brothers. He didn't realise at that time that his movie was soon going to become hijacked, and it would become less bittersweet western and more an Elvis Presley event. When Elvis took the role of Clint Reno in the film that would eventually become Love Me Tender, as I say, the original title for this film was The Reno Brothers. It's often reported in some quarters that it was actually titled A Fight in Reno Brothers, but that's not so certain. What we do know is that the film was certainly not called Love Me Tender. Love Me Tender was a hit single from Elvis Presley that it was released a good month before the movie Love Me Tender came out, and it went to #1 on pre-orders alone. It sold over 1 million in pre-orders. Shortly before the film was due to be released, under the title of The Reno Brothers, they decided to, the studio decided to change the title to capitalize on the success of the song Love Me Tender and the fact that Elvis Presley was now, even though he only had received third billing in the film behind Richard Egan and Deborah Paget, he was very much seen now as the star of this movie. This was no longer just a western, this was an Elvis Presley event, and so the title was changed to Love Me Tender. Another thing that they did at that stage was they reshot the ending, because in the original shot ending and what would eventually be broadcast, Elvis Presley's character dies at the end, trying to save his brother Vance Reno, who he's estranged with. Vance is the other quarter of the love triangle between Elvis, Paget, and Richard Egan, of course. And the studio sort of got a bit worried about killing off Presley in the film when he was such a teen idol. In fact, it's no exaggeration to say at that stage Elvis was the biggest thing in America. And so they decided to reshoot the ending. But yet again, when they tested the new ending, they got worried and they thought it doesn't make sense of the rest of the film. So they went with the original ending of Elvis dying. But what they did do is they brought Elvis back, superimposed onto the screen, singing Love Me Tender over the end credits, almost like a ghost. And by all reports at the time, fans were furious that Elvis died in the movie. There was also problems initially showing the movie because obviously it attracted a large teenage audience, fans of Elvis Presley, who didn't come to see a western. They came to see an Elvis Presley event. And there were problems with them screaming in the cinemas, and some cinemas had to turn the volume up. Now, according to my notes, I jotted this down, but Love Me Tender from 1956, of course, and all these figures are in dollars, was made for a budget of 1 million. Its domestic box office, its initial domestic box office was 4.5 million, which made it a massive hit. Now, worldwide then, it took another 10 million, so it was a massive, massive success. Okay, here's the plot really quickly. There are 4 Reno brothers. There are Richard Egan playing Vance, Reno. There is Elvis playing Clint Reno. There is James Drury playing Ray Reno. William Campbell playing Brett Reno. So that's the four brothers. Deborah Pradgett then is Kathy Reno, who's the character who's married to Elvis Presley's character Clint, though she was the sweetheart before the war of Vance Reno, played of course by Richard Egan. Now the three of the Reno brothers are away at war. That's Vance, Ray and Brett, and they are believed dead. When the film opens, they are robbing, staging a really well filmed actually sequence where they rob a Union gold shipment, a Union payroll. That's really well filmed. And for the most part, this film does play like a traditional Western. But of course, slotting Elvis Presley into that, even though Elvis himself didn't particularly want to sing by all reports, he wanted to take on a serious acting role. The studio knew that having a name like Elvis Presley in a movie, they had to incorporate some of this newfangled thing called rock and roll. But so the film opens with the three Reno brothers taking part in a robbery on the actual day that the war ends, that the Confederate forces surrender on the very day. They don't know this at the time though, so as far as they're concerned, when they are doing the robbery, the money they get from this train is fair game, it's the spoils of war. And then they ride off, then they go back, they turn up back home. Now at this stage, we're talking almost into 20 minutes into the film. Elvis hasn't been seen at all, so Elvis hasn't appeared on screen. So now they ride into their homestead, and there we see the lovely Deborah Pradgett walking along by the hut, by their house, and she looks out and she sees the three Reno brothers riding in, and you can see it in her face. That's something not quite right here. She's shocked and also delighted at the same time. You can see that in her performance, great performance, and it is for the most part a pretty solid Western. Then we get our first shot of Elvis. He's out in the field, working a cultivator plough type thing, his cowboy hat on, sweaty brow. He's walking up the field and he looks up, and all of a sudden he sees his brothers, and he runs to them, absolutely delighted. We thought you were dead, we thought you were dead. Oh, we thought you were dead, baby. And he runs up to them. Now, what we don't fully realise at this stage is that while they were away, believed dead, Elvis's character, Clint Reno, married, played by Deborah Pradgett, who was the sweetheart of Vance. So that sets up the love triangle. And that pretty much drives the rest of the movie, although, of course, the consequences of the gold shipment comes back in the end to haunt the Reno brothers. And we get a pretty effective shootout at the end, Western-style shootout. But what about Elvis Presley's performance? Well, to be honest, it's pretty solid. I mean, this is his first time being on camera as an actor rather than a singer, and apparently he was really nervous. But he wanted to give a performance. He wanted to give an acting performance that could stand aside the rest of the actors. I mean, one of the Reno brothers, Ray Reno, was played by James Drury, a young James Drury, who would later become a massive Western icon. And Elvis's performance is pretty solid. There's a scene where he freaks out because he feels that his wife still has feelings for his brother, Vance, and he attacks her, and it's quite a brutal scene. He attacks her. He has to be pulled off by his brothers, and Elvis gives that scene his all. So, in fairness, his acting in this is a pretty damn good, solid debut performance. Any actor could be proud of it, and it does show signs that had he been given the material, Elvis could, today in 2026, actually be considered a serious actor. But we're going off now, we're getting ahead of ourselves, but because before the films found a formula, and before they became pretty much samey, we had this, Love Me Tender. It's both an Elvis Presley movie and it's not an Elvis Presley movie at the same time. In the accepted sense of what Elvis Presley movies became, then it's not an Elvis Presley movie, but it obviously is an Elvis Presley movie because Elvis Presley is in it. And as I say, he sings Love Me Tender, which was the hit song he performed on the Ed Sullivan Show to such massive audiences, and it made him an household name. Even though he was already at the stage of getting to that stage, it made him an household name. Now, the singing in the movie, for the most part, it works. There's a scene at a fete kind of fair, where Elvis takes to the stage and starts singing. That works. That works in the context of the film. There's an awkward bit midpoint where the Reno family are at home, and all of a sudden Elvis bursts into song. You can see that's kind of shoehorned in, and you can see that that's not as effective as it could be, and it does take you out of the Western melodrama that you're supposed to be watching. But still, they're great performances. I mean, the songs used in this, We're Gonna Leave, Love Me Tender, of course, Poor Boy. Poor Boy, I think, is the best song throughout the entire movie. And Elvis gets to do that swiveling hip stuff that made him such a sensation. Interesting bit of trivia about that. When Elvis first appeared on the Ed Sullivan Show, he was told famously to film him only from the waist up. And there was reportedly a conversation between Ed Sullivan and one of the producers on the show, and they claimed that Elvis was putting some sort of contraption down his pants, tying it down his pants. So that when he wobbled, the biggest suspicion was a Coke bottle, so that when he wobbled, the outline would show there, and that's what apparently they thought drove the screaming girls, females in the audience, bananas, because they thought they were seeing the kingly cock, the wanger, the pistoon, the willy, the John Thomas, you know. It's stated that there are over 1,000 words in the English language to describe the male penis. I can only think of those 4, which probably tells you more about me than I'm comfortable with. What else have I put down in my notes? Yes, we mentioned the massive box office that the movie made. Now, as I say, the film is set just after the Civil War, although the film does play loosely with accepted history. It's more about drama than history, than being factually correct. It's a pretty good movie. It took 30 days of shooting. The single for Love Me Tender came out in September 1956, and the movie followed behind in November 1956. By the time it was released, the title had been changed to Love Me Tender. The ending had been slightly altered, so Elvis still dies in this movie, and that can't be a spoiler. I mean, this is an old movie. I watched a Blu-ray release, and in high definition you can see the film sets. You can see where the film sets end. You can see some of the backlots that are obviously backlots, but that just adds to the charm of the picture. Now, there is a colorized version. I don't know how it's still up, because as far as I'm aware, this film is still under copyright, protected by colorized. But there is a colorized version of this film hiding away in the naughty corner of YouTube. It's there. I took a look at it. The colorization is okay, but it doesn't beat the original black and white seeing the film as God intended. So anyway, that's Love Me Tender. Now, I've got a rating system for these movies. The next Elvis movie, of course, because we're going in order, will be Loving You. That is more of a traditional Elvis movie, although that didn't adhere strictly to what the formula would become. The Elvis Presley movie formula had not yet been invented. And we'll talk about that in another video. So the next one will be Loving You. And now I've got a rating system for these movies. Every time I'm doing a review, I'm always, as always, sipping a dram of whiskey. So I'm going to give these movies 1 to 5 drams. And Love Me Tender comes in firmly at 3.5 drams, which makes it a high-end blend rather than a single malt. So that's Love Me Tender, Elvis Presley. Come back soon to hear my takes on Loving You.